everyone, this is Kristina, live from DPW Podcast Studio. Today, it's been a busy start to the day, and we are about to talk about a very exciting and relevant topic, value creation in procurement. I'm very pleased to have Klaus with me here today, who has been leading the transformation of procurement from a purely transactional to a strategic driver of value. So Klaus, very happy to have you and thank you for joining. But to kick us off, please present yourself and tell us a little bit about your role in Siemens.
First of all, thank you for having me here, and it's very exciting to have this talk together with you. And my name is Klaus Staubitzer, I'm the CPO of Siemens, and I'm more than happy to get in touch with you now to talk about our transformation process.
Very happy to have you. So, Klaus, traditionally, as I mentioned before, procurement has been a position, a function, that has been seen as quite transactional, but now it's moving to being a strategic driver of value. But can you tell us a little bit more how you see it in Siemens, and what do you believe are the key levers to transitioning procurement from purely transactional to the value creator or value driver?
I mean, we were facing a couple of years ago the situation that we were very much focused on cost cutting only. That was the reason why we thought, okay, is it really the biggest value we can take out of a spend of about 35 billion euros? Or is there any other additional value we can create? So that was a very initial moment where we thought about, okay, is there any idea to transform the function from a pure cost cutter to a value creator? And then we walked out into the organization and of course asked our stakeholders what they expect from us. So, and then it came out that there are a few other dimensions we have to consider. First, of course, productivity will not go away. This is one of the key elements. Then we, of course, should use the innovation power of our suppliers more than we are doing it today. Quality is also something which is relevant. And there are other two dimensions like sustainability and resilience. And these 5 dimensions creates a little bit the strategic framework for us. And the real challenge is to keep all these different dimensions into a balance. So that's a little bit the Champions League idea.
Exactly. Thank you so much. So 5 key levers to transition into the procurement towards the value creator. But you mentioned sustainability, and I can't help but double click on that one as it's very close to my heart, but also to my work. So
Right.
Could you tell us a little bit more how you're driving sustainability in procurement, and how are you managing to balance the often competing priorities like cost, speed, sustainability in this interconnected environment? So.
Yeah, true. I mean, now, once we talk about sustainability, for us, sustainability is not only CO2 emission. So we have different let's say dimensions of sustainability. The first one is the fundamental part of sustainability. So what does that mean? We got to have a supplier base who is really compliant. So is all our suppliers, do they follow the ready for business process? Do they sign the code of conduct? Do they have the right qualification? So this is kind of a homogeneous or kind of a basic fundamental part of sustainability. Once this is tick marked, then we think about the performance level of our suppliers. And once they come to performance, then of course we talk about sustainability. And sustainability in sense of performance has also 2 facets. One facet is what is the CO2 footprint, the carbon footprint of our suppliers? So in other words, what is their 1 and 2 scope 3, scope 1 and 2. And in addition, the question is, what is the product carbon footprint, what we are buying from these suppliers? So in other words, there's a huge discussion around what's the transparency into these 2 dimensions. And of course, we developed some of the tools to get transparency and also to get in touch with our suppliers to help them to improve. And we of course, we develop a CWA, a carbon web assessment, where each and every supplier can do some kind of self-assessment to figure out where they are from a sustainable supplier standpoint. That means their 1 and 2 scope. And I think that it's really unique. We have developed a green digital twin, which allows us to create a digital CO2 twin of any kind of product we buy from our suppliers. So that puts us into the position to have transparency, what we are buying and what's the emission part of that. And maybe the last one, and I think this is also very relevant, now we create a training program for our suppliers so that we make them fit also for these discussions we are having with the suppliers. So that's pretty interesting to see this kind of progress going forward in our supplier base.
Indeed. And I can't help but think while you're speaking about sustainability, obviously sustainability cannot exist in a vacuum. And in the light of the past few years where we had a lot of crises and that have proven that our global supply chains are not only deeply interconnected but also vulnerable, I see also resilience becoming one of the key strategic priorities for the companies overall, but also for procurement. So can you tell us a little bit more about how you are at Siemens driving and approaching resilience in procurement?
Absolutely true, and resilience. And if you see all the other geopolitical tensions which came around over the last years, and maybe it started off with Corona at that time, and that was very interesting to see how many changes do we had at that time also in our linear supply chains. Before, for example, Corona kicked in, we had really very well established linear supply chains. That means one and another supplier relied on each other. So all of a sudden these linear supply chains were broken, and then we had to rethink about how can we prepare for the future, and that was a moment where we have more focus on resilience. And one first step, if you want to manage resilience, is always get transparency as much as you can, which is not easy if you have a supplier base of about 65,000 suppliers only on the first tier level, spread around the globe. The good thing is we created this transparency over the last years, that we know where is our supplier base and what are the current challenges within the supplier base. The second one was that we also thought about how can we be more local for local. So in the past we were focused on KPIs like what is our global value sourcing share. That means how much volume do we buy from low-cost countries. Now it's quite clear you can, for example, not easily use a Chinese supplier for a business in the US and the other way around. So we have to be more focused on local for local. And the third one, which is maybe it's an old story within procurement, but the dependency on single sources is in some cases pretty high, and the single sources in many cases is homemade. So we constantly think about with our cross-functional partners how can we be more flexible in sense of second sources and also be more local for local. And maybe the last one, and I think that's a really strategic one, is how do you, and that always starts on the sales side. So the first question you always have to answer, how do you feed your customers? So where do you believe is the next growth potential? And once you have clarity on that, then you have to think about where is your own value chain. That means where are your factories? And if this is clear, if you have these manufacturing footprint clear, then from supply chain and procurement comes the question, okay, how can we feed our own factories? And not the other way around. And therefore, I believe within Siemens we are very clear on that, and luckily we did I wouldn't say a fantastic job, but a quite good job over the last year. So we have no significant downturns, we have no line stops. So that is maybe one of the results out of the idea to balance out this supply chain and procurement volume in this idea of the value creation.
So you mentioned transparency, localization, but also risk management in terms of dependencies. And maybe you can tap yourself a little bit on the shoulder for the good job that you did during this time. But as we know, resilience is not only about managing the crisis and being in the reactive mode to them, but it's also how we rethink partnerships. So you mentioned about linear supply chains, a lot about reliance on our partners to solve this. So can you tell us a little bit more on how you are utilizing procurement as a catalyst for innovation, and how are you rethinking the relationship with suppliers in terms of now moving maybe more towards partnerships and thinking about ecosystems and the like?
I I think this relationship situation you mentioned, for me, this is really a key element, because many people talk about this famous ecosystem. We have to work and act into an ecosystem. And then if you look around, then you see, whoops, a supplier could be at the same time your customer. In our case, the supplier is also a competitor and a partner. So the idea of you are a supplier, I'm your customer, that's probably old stuff. Going forward, we maybe have to think about how is our relationship and treat each other as partners.
So it's not anymore I win, you lose, but it's rather the famous win-win, isn't it?
That's the very interesting part. How can we come to a win-win? And I always say we have to take care that a ecosystem does not turn into an ego system. Okay, and then the question is, what leads us to this win-win situation? And it's not always easy, and I always have to say it's not 100% clear how you really come to this win-win situation, because your relationship could change overnight. And
what do you mean by that? Can you clarify a little bit?
Sometimes you have a supplier who is tomorrow your competitor because of some acquisitions or because of some changes in their structure, leads to the situation that you, for example, if you work together with a software company, they issue a new product, and that is, of course, one of your competitors. So that could easily happen, and therefore you better have to be prepared. And again, transparency is the name of the game, and of course we have to use artificial intelligence. And if I look around here into the different booths, transparency is absolutely a must, is a brutally must. Just to have the ability to figure out what could lead to a win-win situation. Otherwise you have blind spots and you simply don't know what's going on. Then a very simple example is, sometimes it is helpful that you know how much purchasing volume you have with your supplier, and also how much sales volume you have with this supplier, who is at the same time your customer. So it's not easy to balance that out.
Oh. But Klaus, you mentioned one other important thing while we were chatting just before podcast, and that is that sometimes in German organizations like Siemens, there is this mindset that there is no intelligent life outside Siemens. Can you clarify a little bit more about that? And tell me, how are you actually working with that mindset in the organization to change it to something?
Yeah, I know what you mean, and I mentioned this very interesting example where we said, okay, how can we improve the situation on the innovation side, because we simply know, or we simply believe that there is really a high innovation expertise in our supplier base. And the first thing we thought, how can we address this? And we simply go into the organization and talk to some R&D departments and ask these guys if they want to place some kind of project, some kind of innovation project to the outside market on one of these innovation platforms. At that time, I guess we used these platform 9 sites, so you can place a project and the industry suppliers can quote on that. The interesting part was for many of these R&D guys, it was not so easy to find the right project, because at that very moment, if you ask an R&D guy, what is the stuff we want to place on this platform, they have to think about what is their core competence and what is the stuff they want to give to the external market. So once they are clear about that, the next question is they have to describe it very precisely so that the outside market fully understands what it is. And once this is done, then you place it on the platform, and in our case we get a lot of quotes, we get a lot of cool ideas. So comes the next challenge for procurement and R&D. You have to evaluate these different quotes very fast. If not, this channel is dead for the next few weeks and months. So once that is clear, then the question is, how do you interact with the supplier? And in our case, we found really cool ideas, and the R&D guys were so satisfied, and the quote you reflected was that some of the guys then stated from R&D, I wasn't really aware of the situation, there's intelligent life outside Siemens, and I think that's so symptomatic for many other big companies, not only in Germany, also maybe in the US and somewhere else. And the idea is, how can we boost the R&D efficiency by using the knowledge of our suppliers? And I think this is a real challenge going forward, because we need that kind of innovation power more than we are needed in the past.
I'm thinking of one more thing as well, Klaus, because we talk a lot about the relationship with suppliers and so on, but also thinking a little bit about the relationship with our stakeholders internally. And of course, there is the famous early involvement of procurement. But as we move towards this, having this more value creator role, it's not enough to have only the seat at the table. There needs to be digital transformation also happening, but also the power of people, culture, and so on. And here at DPW, we see the groundbreaking innovation that is happening in the world of procurement. But what do you think are key levers, other than technology itself, but maybe organizational change management, cultural or alike, that are critical to procurement making this transition towards a more strategic function?
I fully agree, and we are on that topic, early involvement, integration to the business. We are on that topic, for years now. And if I reflect the situation where I was in charge of a business as a CEO and as a CFO, I always ask myself, who do I invite for the famous decision table? I call it a decision table. If you are not invited, if you do not have a place at the decision table, you will be not involved in any kind of decisions. And in the past, the procurement guys were very much seen as somebody who fulfills the order. Okay,
cost cutter.
Exactly. You throw somebody the purchasing order over the fence, and then they go out and negotiate like hell to get the best price. So then people complain about on procurement side, I do not get an invitation for this famous decision table. Then comes the question, what kind of expertise do you bring to the decision table that the CEOs and CFO want to invite you? And now I believe we have more transparency, we have more competence to convince the people. If they early involve us, we can contribute to a higher level of value. So what does that mean? If they involve us earlier in MPLM, product lifecycle management, in an R&D process, we can show these guys what happens if they change some of the features, some of the requirements. What does it mean for the cost structure? By the way, we have a digital cost twin where we can analyze in a twin technology the cost structure and a CO2 emission, so we can give a strong support to our cross-functional partners to improve their cost level, their performance level, and this is by far above these only negotiation stuff and cost-cutting stuff. So I think once you want to come and enter this place at the decision table, you have to bring something. Yeah? And now the people see more and more it is worthwhile having these guys at the table. So I strongly believe we are not done, or fully done, but we are on a good way.
Good. So it's an evolving journey that we are on, and
absolutely.
Far from being
Postcard.
Indeed. Good. But then, Klaus, minding that we are talking about the transformation that needs to balance, as you mentioned before, these 5 key levers, so productivity, sustainability, innovation, quality, and resilience. How do you see procurement in the next, say, 5 to 10 years, so a little bit looking forward, and what do you believe are key things for success also in your role, or maybe if you want to twist it around, what is the legacy that you hope to leave behind yourself?
That's a very big question, I have to say. So I'm asking this question myself constantly, and I have to say the biggest lever is really this AI agent topic. And if you look here around, there are so many good ideas, and we really have to adapt this topic as much as we can. Doing nothing in sense of artificial intelligence is not optional.
Going backwards.
Absolutely. And the most important stuff in that regard is how do we take our people with us on this journey? Because this value creator story, I always say that's an infinity game. That means that will never end. Okay, we will never be at the very highest level of a value creation. Here and there will be some changes in what's the real value for the business. Might it be resilience more, might it be less sustainability, or the other way around. So the mixture of the different elements will be different over the time. But what we need is people who are focused on this value creation and take all the tools, all the systems which are available for that, to integrate it, to make it happen. And I strongly believe it's a huge change and transformation process on the people side. So if our people see artificial intelligence as a threat, they will never make it. Yeah. If we can motivate the people and all our stakeholders, this is a huge opportunity and we have to embrace this to the highest possible level, then I have a good feeling that we really move on this journey to the value creator. And it's going to be very interesting to see how we really embrace the stuff and how do we get the most out of these existing tools. And again, for me, artificial intelligence, digitalization is no longer a technical issue. It's a pure culture transformation issue. So, courage, curiosity, adventurous spirit, and then go for it. So, Klaus, I will not take any more of your time here at DPW to explore the amazing world of AI in procurement. And with that, I want to thank you once again for being here with us at DPW Podcast Studio. This has been Value Creation in Procurement with Klaus, the CPO of Siemens, and Kristina, Director of Sustainability and Strategic Planning in Tetra Pak. Thank you so much for listening and see you next year. Thank you. Take care. Bye.